applying it from a different perspective.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting. And Matt, obviously you've come from a bit of a different background in terms of, was it a master's in economics or something like that, was it?
Yeah. You do well to remember that.
I've definitely not just got off your Twitter to check that at all. How have you found getting into the world of football? Obviously, from someone who's not really done much of a sporting background in terms of education, how is that, and sort of how did it come about?
Yeah, so it's a very unconventional route, very much off that Moneyball line of like economist gets a job in recruitment. But yeah, so I started off doing accounting finance undergrad. Didn't really fancy it. Kind of liked economics, a lot more maths, a lot more data involved. But still, like, economics is basically theory. There's no practical use, so I can't really take too much of those skills into football. But a lot of it in terms of stats and a lot of it in terms of interpreting data is stuff that I can really transfer into my job, and it's been pretty useful so far.
Okay, great. It's just interesting now that there's so many different pathways into football, and like you look at clubs now hiring data scientists, and as you say, from people from completely different sectors. It just gives you sort of someone else's fresh eyes who can hopefully bring different skills in that doesn't necessarily have a football background, and can transfer those skills to obviously football from what we've learned elsewhere. But it's interesting. I imagine there's a bit of a standoff unless you're working at a slightly more progressive club and don't have as many, shall we say, older people who have those sort of views as I'm sure all three of us and many other people who are listening have experienced those challenges. But yeah, so how are you both finding it? Obviously, are you both working full time? Obviously, and sort of is it the organised chaos that we spoke about earlier? Sort of what do your days look like? How would you go about waking up in the morning and cracking on with your work? Like, are you in the training ground? Is it sort of just running models, or is it sort of, you two go away and sort of have a look at this for us? I'll let whoever pick that up first if you want.
And then I'll start from me. So I'm currently part-time while I finish off my Masters. So the club are currently putting me through a Masters programme just to get me up to date with future skills in case to move elsewhere, which is fair enough. It's just jumping from one education to another. Mostly my days consist of a training ground, and it's basically keeping on top of a lot of stuff that we've got set up. There's me and another person that are in the department, and then my boss above me, and then another boss above him. So it's kind of, we get the drop down of what needs doing and getting things prepared. We've got things that we've set up throughout the season that we keep monitoring and tracking from a recruitment point of view that gets updated weekly. So they get kept on top of. And then there's daily tasks, reports from the weekend or from wherever I've been in the week. So some weeks it will be between 3 and 4 games. Some weeks it will be the 1. Some it will be just 2. And it just depends on what's needed. I like spending a lot of time from the data side and looking at the stuff that StatsBomb has and how can we apply that, and using different methods to try and get the most out of that data. And basically, can we find, I like, the big learning curve for me is matching things up with my eye that is matched to the data. And I'm sat watching a player and I won't look at the data, and I'm trying to stop myself from relying on the data so much. I look at what's going on from the game. I'll make my opinion, write some notes down, and it's getting closer and closer to each other at the moment, which is pleasing. It's like, right, I'm seeing the things from the data that actually matches to the eye, and right, this is where we need to go through now. It's mostly just plug in with reports, filling in things that we've got set up at the club, and then just some ad hoc tasks, because football's very fluid. And if my boss's boss needs something doing, then it has to be done within half an hour, or they've got a meeting or something that needs discussing, that has to be ready. So I'm sure most of you guys will know and relate to that, as if the coaching staff or management or even board members need something, that you get it done quickly and get it out of the way.
Yeah, it's got to have the process in place. You can't have something sprung on you that needs to be done by the end of the day. That's going to take you 2 days to do. You've got to have a good process in place. Completely agree. Matt, what about yourself? How do your days look?
Yeah, so it's quite different actually. Like the whole setup. I'm situated at Oakwell full time. The training ground is on the opposite end, by design. That is. Um, so I normally just come in. I'll load up a bunch of spreadsheets. Typical, I know. And we have like a short list of players that we'll go through. Look, like so we currently monitor and add this short list as we go along, and then we use this as like a basis of players to watch during the week. So a lot of my job is really watching video, but to find the players to watch initially, we'll use data to identify them.
Okay, interesting. And again, obviously, Jacob, you sort of touched on it there about the eye test. I think one thing I learned quickly is that just because a player shows up good on certain metrics that you like and you go and watch them, it doesn't mean that he's going to be the best player on the pitch straight away. How again to both of you, like how important is the eye test? I think a lot of people seem to think, oh, we're just going and signing players and we're using the data to do it. But how important is it to go and actually watch them, ideally live, obviously, if not on video, to one, back up what you see by the data, but yeah, how do you two find the eye test? Like, how often are you going to games as well?
Yeah, from a club point of view, we wouldn't sign a single player without watching them live at least a handful of times. We'd never purely rely on just data and purely just rely on the video. That's the club policy, and this always has been. But every player we watch would go through a process. We've got obviously the initial stage, the identifying, like Matt would speak about. We'll use data, we'll use agencies, we'll use people, clubs offering out players offering themselves out, all sorts. They come from all corners, but they all go through the due diligence. They all get a data check, they all get a video check, they all get scouted, they all then go live, and it's a very streamlined process. There's a lot of players going at the top, and then it gets bit by bit as they get tick off through the list. But no, the club policy itself is they don't get signed unless they've been watched live. And obviously with Brexit and COVID and stuff, that has added stumbling blocks and made travel more difficult. So getting to games and being able to do that has been difficult. But it's about adjusting that and being able then to how can we shift focus elsewhere? What can we do? How can we work around these solutions? And my boss has always spoken about we need to have an equal ratio of live games that we do to video games. Or in the case he wants to try and move it forward to be double that. So for every live game, we're watching 2 video. And so then we're always covering and always watching whatever we can and getting as much information on these players as possible.
It's interesting. Like from my perspective, from what I've been exposed to so far, we definitely don't do enough video from my perspective. And I absolutely agree that you want to see a player live, but you want to see that player in different context, when they're playing away from home, when they're losing. Are they down to 10 men? Are they 2-0 up and comfortable? How do they react to situations? And I think that's where beautiful things such as video come, and obviously data come in now, that you can see people in different contexts without having to travel 2 hours over the course of every night over the course of a month to go and watch players over the breadth of the country. Definitely, I completely agree with that. Matt, what about you? How are you finding getting out to games now and again, and watching stuff on the video? Are you finding there's a discrepancy between players which are standing out on the metrics versus the eye test, or is everything marrying up and you're happy to go and sign a player off the back of your data and watch them once because you know they're the player you want?
I mean, I'd love a world where we can sign a player purely off data, but it's just not possible at the minute, especially with like defensive like contributions and off the ball stuff. But maybe we'll get there one day. Well, I watch like a fair bit of video. I get out to like a live game maybe once or twice a week, but I normally try and reserve the live games for something that's not covered already. So like Premier League 2 games, which I'm sure you know very well, Liam. So games like that is what I try and get out to. Games that we don't have data for and games that we can't watch whenever.
Definitely. No, I completely agree. It makes sense. I think we could have another whole episode dedicated to the PL2, why hardly anyone has any data and why hardly it's ever broadcasted or the video is hardly ever available. But that's another story for another day. But yeah, so how obviously both come through a similar sort of way in terms of posting stuff out online and on Twitter. And how do you two find the community? Obviously less active now with the roles that obviously we have and you two have. But sort of how encouraging was that as a platform to get yourself and your work out there?
Oh, Twitter, honestly, it's one of the best decisions I made was this public portfolio. Like, I've met incredible people off it. I've made connections with people. I've been able to do things I didn't think I'd be able to. And I was very fortunate that my current boss happened to follow this account on Twitter. And it literally was a late December evening, probably nearly a year ago now. I was just sat there and thought, what's the worst that can happen? Like, if he's just going to tell me no and tell me to leave him alone. So I just dropped him a message and basically said, look, I haven't got X, Y, and Z, but I can do this. And now ended up in the situation I'm in, went through the interview processes, and that was the point where I could show my visualization skills and show all the stuff I've been putting together for the last couple of years and apply it to a practical example at a club and show that. So yeah, I'm forever grateful for the opportunity I have. And it's just now about keep improving, fitting more to the club mould, branching away more from the Twitter side of things and making things look nice. They need to be practical, but also look nice. And basically just keep improving on myself.
And what about yourself, Matt?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything there. I think just about the journey and the development as well, like picking up all these skills, getting really good constructive feedback from people that are in the industry already. Like, that is so valuable. And then you can, if you improve and develop it on yourself, then you just keep getting better and you get to a point where you can actually apply and like get these jobs. It's incredible.
No, I completely agree. Like from my especially more so you two. Actually, it's quite poignant that you two I've managed to get you in for the first episode of this. Just given how much pestering of DMs I used to do for a lot of people, just like, oh, how did you do this? Like, what is this? I didn't even know Tableau was a thing when I started this Twitter account, and now somehow got a little job at a football club. So it's interesting. I think it's great for development. And to be fair, though, it's great to actually put stuff out there that even gets seen, like the fact that, you know, someone might retweet something and one of your friends goes, I've seen your stuff got retweeted or mentioned by whoever. And just seeing your work out there and people actually take an interest in it, I think is definitely great. But there's loads of positives from it. As you say, the experience of putting stuff out there, getting feedback and improving, is just one of many. But both of you two, we've been in the clubs a little bit of time now, and obviously had some good experiences. Sort of, what's the biggest things you've learned so far? Obviously, we touched on a few already, and sort of the key things to remember when you are working in a club or putting stuff out on Twitter or whatever. So what are your sort of main takeaways from that perspective?
From a club point of view, it's just about setting things up and being prepared to then get it ready for the future. Is okay, yes, we'll do something for 1 week, but we need to make sure that can then be easy to replicate and keep doing it every week. So the bit of advice that always stuck with me, especially from a performance analysis point of view, was make sure your workflows are easy to replicate. Don't produce a 100-page dossier that you're not then going to do weekly and can't do weekly. You want to produce something that is good quality, but that you can keep doing, keep setting up. So having your Excel spreadsheets to be automatic and automated, don't have to keep fiddling around with graphics and changing it to and edit it and have a template set up, have a workbook on Tableau that auto-fills when you put the data in, just to save yourself time and to make sure that you've got an effective workflow that you can then spend more time doing live scouting, doing the video stuff, doing reports, and just keeping life easier for everyone. And from a performance analysis, from a recruitment point of view, it's always just about efficiency and being as quick and as effective as you can.
Yeah, very good points. What about yourself, Matt? Anything different to that?
Yeah, I think having an efficient workflow, efficient process is very key. Keeping the reports pretty simple, readable. You get to the point where you start realizing, like, why, like, who am I doing this for? Like, because maybe the people above you might just scan like the summary or scan the grading that you've given, and so you've written a whole paragraph on, you know, a bunch of really nice triangles and counter pressing, all sorts of fancy words you want to throw in there, like half spaces, and they're not even going to read it. They're just going to look at the grading at the end. So keeping stuff short. I think one of the other things is just trust your own opinion. Like, if the case make mistakes, like, you're not going to be getting all these players correct. So you are going to have a player that's going to maybe sign might be bad. Like, it's just going to happen. Not everything works out. Not everyone has a linear development, so don't be worried to make a mistake, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. I think, especially with, well, I think anyone when starting a new job potentially might not be willing, especially in football, to go out the way and sort of stick their neck out on the line or share their opinion for the fear of being shot down, really. But especially as younger people, I think working in football clubs it can be a daunting place at times. But I think understanding and knowing the time and place to actually raise your opinion and to actually do it in a nice manner or the best way is so valuable. Like, at the end of the day, you've got that role and you've got people listening to you because they want your opinion. Don't be afraid to share it and do it in the best way. Use your data, make your point and make your argument with sort of valid rationale and not just off the cuff. But as you said, but just the nature of football, development isn't linear. Not everyone's going to be a success. But equally, it's recognising why isn't it a success? Going back at the signings you made in the summer, at the end of the year or 2 years ago, sort of how's their data looking at your club? Sort of have they developed as you would have hoped? Have they improved the squad as you would have hoped? And sort of, if not, why? And take those learnings and remember them for the next window or for the next player you go away and scout. I think is massive. A bit more of a light-hearted one. Now, just off the cuff of my head, sort of, what's the most sort of bizarre thing or the thing that's just shocked you? And it could be other scouts, games, data, opinions, old people in football. I think one for me the other day, which I tweeted about, was an old boy scout at a game writing his notes on the back of his ticket in time and writing, and then at half time asking his mate to rip out him a page from his book to then write some notes. I think was up there for me. Have you two got any funny stories?
Oh, I had they probably weren't. They're probably only a few years ahead of me, not much older. I've been probably mid-40s, if that, and they were discussing how they no longer judge players for wearing gloves and that they were really proud of themselves for moving on and getting up with modern times. And I was sat there thinking, what do you want to... And they were like, oh, no, we're just used to judging for wearing gloves, but, you know, we've got with modern methods now, we're really moving on. I was like, fair enough, maybe steps and all that if you fancy it.
Oh, it's just laughable, isn't it? It's just laughable. About yourself, Matt, any funny stories from your experiences so far?
Not yet, but like, it's always so polarizing when you go into like a scout box and everyone's at least like 30 years older than you. And, I think I went to a game at Accrington and like the lady, the secretary, she didn't think I was a scout. Like, I was there trying to get the ticket, and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah, the awkward looks or something, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's always a bit of imposter syndrome because I'm only just turned 22 and there are people there that have been in the game longer than I've been born, and they're all looking at you thinking, who's this young lad? What's he doing here? he can't be right. So I normally go with the story that I'm just here ground hopping, and I'm here just to see the ground and get out. I managed to get myself a nice ticket to see the new stadium. And then normally they'll go, oh, all right, that seems more reasonable, because it's just too awkward, because I don't really know what to say. I'm so much younger than everyone. It's right. It's my own little quirk.
I agree. It's just funny. Like we actually met for the first time the other day at a game, didn't we? And we was talking about these sort of situations, and sort of you're in the scout box or grabbing a coffee, and you've got sort of two old boys talking to each other, just going, "Oh, don't really not really into all this data and sort of taking our jobs." It's just like you're just sort of stood there quietly, and like as they're giving you the evil eyes. It's incredibly funny. But onto a little bit about football anyway. Sort of. A couple ones for me. First of all, sort of best games or best teams you've seen this season. Any standouts for either of you two?
Well, for me, I know it's a bit late to the party, but I thought Harvey Elliott was absolutely sensational when he started the season this year. I had him nailed on to probably get an England cap before the year turned, and then he happened to then go injured and got whatever. It was just a nasty challenge from behind. And I was looking at it thinking, it's ruined his chances, because I was thinking Qatar 2020, he probably could have squeezed himself into that squad somewhere. Like, this year, he was just absolutely sensational. And the form he had at Blackburn to then carry it on at Liverpool as well, he just looked completely different talent and miles and heads and shoulders above any other 18, 19-year-old that I had seen. And he looked special, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the England setup probably in the next 18 months to 2 years.
Interesting. What about yourself, Matt? Any teams before or players?
I'm going to stay away from players for a comment.
That's absolutely fine.
Either of you two get any smart ideas for January window? I think teams like MK Dons and Oxford always do really well. I really like how they're set up. But a special shout out to our fellow Yorkshiremen, Rotherham United. I don't know what they do, but they do it so well every single year. They always just seem to bounce back. Michael Smith seems to be on another great season.
Yeah, completely agree with MK Dons. I think was having a chat the other day. I think everyone thought that they were going to be in a bad situation, obviously with Martin leaving so close to the season, obviously, and what they've done there to replace him with, actually, I think probably someone who's a little bit better towards what they need. I think Martin can sometimes be death by passes all the time, whereas I think Manning's a little bit sort of could change it up when he needs to, or can do it sometimes. Like I think the other week when they played Burton, they had less possession than Burton in a game of football, which you think for like an MK Dons side is absolutely crazy. But no, I think MK Dons, and as you say there, Rotherham for me are ridiculous. I think they're just a different beast. If they didn't lose many players, and the ones that they did, they've sort of them recruited well again. And as you say, some standout players in their team that you mentioned there, and they look a good place to go on and probably get promotion again at the first time of asking again. So yeah, completely agree with that. But yeah, we're doing all right for listeners actually. Sort of got up above the 80 mark for a time there, which I don't think is too bad for Friday evening when everyone's probably down at the pub. But yeah, for those people who have joined in and are enjoying it, and if you don't already, absolutely drop these two great lads a follow on Twitter. You know, as we said earlier, not as active on here nowadays as you can imagine with the roles that they have, but definitely good value for a follow anyway. And also myself, it's definitely greatly appreciated, and would like to try and carry on and get to do more of these things in the future as well. And also, if there's any potential guests for future episodes, and you think you have got a few things to tell people and are going to be a good bit of value, definitely drop me a message. Open to having any interesting character on here in the future as well. But one more before we get into some questions that we've had sent in. We've had a few. Sort of, what would your two's recommendations be to people who aspire or want to work in football, whether that be in a recruitment role or a scout or a performance analyst? Sort of, what is it that you would do more of or do different to get into a role now?
I'd say keep plugging away, put yourself out there, find your niche. And I know it's cliche and it works. Find something that makes you different to everyone else and shout about it from the rooftops. There are 92 clubs in England, and each recruitment team will probably have between 1 to 5 analysts, depending on how big a department is. That's not a lot of jobs considering how many millions of people love football. So you need to be different. You need to show you can do it. And if you do go the academic route like I did, go do it practically. Go learn how to hold that tripod and camera, why it is absolutely tipping it down with an umbrella, with a camera, why a coach is shouting at you. The practical experience is the thing that will set you apart. And then the skills that you put the effort in to learn and show will then also set you apart. You're not just, yes, I've got a B license. Yes, I've got a degree. Yes, that's not enough. You need to have a practical background. You need to show you've done it. You've put the effort in to do it, and then anything extra, like the Twitter accounts. And there are so many good accounts and so many brilliant people that it'd be great to see people pushing on and pushing the boundaries and keep going. And there's more and more breaking to clubs. We're going to hopefully see more and more from Twitter taking that leap and stepping into a club background.
Matt?
Yeah, I can only really echo what Jacob said there about just constantly look to share your work, just be open to constructive feedback. I think that's one of the main things. Just always look to improve and keep developing. But I think one of the things that I kind of think differently is just don't be put off by the requirements. Like, I think the Barnsley job required like a sports science degree, but they just kind of put that on there. I don't think you might not need everything on there as long as you can prove you can show that you can do all the other stuff. Because I don't have a degree in sports science or performance analysis, but I've shown with my work, like post on Twitter, that I can still evaluate and analyze players and matches, and so I kind of have that skill without the official route of doing it. So I wouldn't be put off by any degree-specific requirements, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree and echo both sentiments there. I just think put yourself out there is one thing. Like, I wouldn't have got opportunities in a bit of freelance roles and obviously at Wigan without putting yourself out there, sharing your work. As you say, I think Twitter's a great place, and there's so many people who I probably don't even follow all of them because I've just not come across them. There's just so many people now out there putting great stuff out. Ask them for feedback, sort of share your work with them, get their opinion on things, sort of what would they do better. But equally, share your learnings. Like, if someone's doing something and you think, oh wow, that's pretty cool, sort of how could you do something similar and put your own spin on it and make it your own. And I think that's one thing that can be done. Stevie Grieve at where is he on Twitter? Is the head of recruitment at St Johnstone. He put out a nice thread the other day after saying that he got a few DMs about working in football, and his sort of 7 things on there were absolutely great. And as you said there, differentiate yourself, translate your data, and add the insight. Sort of, I think people forget data is great. You want the context. You need to add context to your data. Sort of, if you're on Twitter, like, use a GIF, put yourself out there, do something that's a little bit different to other people. Sort of look at your own processes for looking at players. Sort of, why do you look at those players? Sort of, what is it you're looking for, and sort of have your own idea of what that is. Understanding that development isn't linear, and not all 21-year-olds are going to improve, but equally there's going to be players who are older than 21 who are going to be sort of the player you want and potentially can improve still. So it's there's more that goes in there, but it's a great thread from Stevie on that. but yeah, we've got a few questions, so let's get into them. Some of them. So, Gareth Watts on Twitter said, given performance, or given the performance of data in recruitment decisions, is it possible for some players to get torn between what their agents are saying, for example, increase forward running stats, and what a manager is saying, i.e., get back? Does that encourage more individual actions at a team's expense? Sort of, what's your two thoughts on that?
It's not something I've experienced personally. I've not heard them conversations, either from it as a performance analyst or as a recruitment analyst. The coach's job is to win football games at the end of the day, and they will set up their team to win whatever way that means. And whether that means increased forward running or increased pressing or whatever, then that's up to the coach. But no, I've never heard conversations of that nature. Or, come on, you need to up your stats to get signed.
No, I can't say I have either, but more agencies are starting to incorporate data. I feel like there's a lot of leeway for misuse of this data. So it could be happening, but I wouldn't know either. I'm not quite involved in that coaching side to really realise those kind of things.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely don't think that is sort of what is that's not what the agencies and are using the data for. I think from my limited experience of doing some of that stuff, having done a few bits for agents who sort of putting dossiers together on their players, I think that's one way it's going more. I think there's been big stories obviously with KDB getting a new contract using a company, and I definitely think that's one way that their agents are looking to use people who know about data to help get moves for their players. However, again, as you said there, Matt, are they getting the right people to do that sort of thing, and is what they're getting out correct? Because equally, not every player is going to be stand out on all the metrics. And are the agencies going to like it when a scout gives them a dossier or an analyst gives them a dossier on their player, and it's not all pretty green and rosy to get them a new move? But yeah, so that's our thoughts. I don't think it's quite the same context with agents using data in that aspect in terms of the conflict of interest. But yeah, just a few thoughts there. Football Fan 007 has put in a triple header of questions. We'll go through them one by one. Sort of, are there any sources that people use to look at salaries across industry? You know, is there a reference point, i.e. the average salary of this role? I think from my own personal ability, it's very hush hush across football in everything. That's only my perspective. I don't know about yourselves.
Football Managers is pretty good. Like, I think I saw it when I was doing my dissertation. I included salaries from Football Manager. I think they try and say it's between like within 5% confidence of it being like true, like accurate. So it's a pretty good estimate to use that if you've really got nothing. But of course, you can just like ask the agent, or you can just, for reference in roles, you just kind of use your own team, right? So say if I certain, I was going to use an example there, but I probably shouldn't reveal that kind of information. To say if like a left wing back in the team earns X amount, like would this other person improve the team that much to earn this much more? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think from salary point of view, unless you're pursuing a player, it's 9 times out of 10 it'll be agent led or ballpark figures that you can work from. It's nothing. There is no concrete like transfer list where you can log on and see what every player's earning. It's a case of speak to people, but that normally doesn't come till the very end of the process. It's not something you would look at, or at least from my club's perspective, we wouldn't look at the start of the process.
Yeah, I agree. Although my only thing about Football Manager wages is the fact that they definitely think I get paid a lot more money than I actually do.
Yeah, don't look at the analyst wages. I'm on like 50k a year.
Oh, funny. And sort of how, another question from the same person is, how do you use analytics to identify talent? Obviously, without going into too much detail, sort of what is it you do in terms of is it getting certain metrics for a position and then looking at who stands out on them? Is there a little bit more to it, or sort of? I know some people, I'm presuming definitely not you two, given the clubs you're involved with, start with the video or start with the actual footage first and then go to the data afterwards. Sort of, I know a high level overview of sort of what both of your processes would be, if possible.
Data is just the indicator. Basically, it will be used in a specific way in order to identify talent, and it is just one of many ways. As mentioned earlier, there are a ton of strings to said bow that can bring a player to our attention, and data is just one of them. And that's basically in that process of how it will work. But it's nothing flashy. It's not groundbreaking stuff, but it gives us what we need and gives us foundations to work off.
I think additionally, it's really useful to use to try and find someone that fits the current style. Obviously, it's something we're quite strong about, something we try and stick to a lot, is trying to recruit for a specific style rather than for each new manager that comes in every 12 months. So I think using the data, we can easily identify players that would suit the style that we already have instead of constantly changing every 12 months.
Yeah, no, spot on. Completely agree. The final one from the same person. Any tips or opinions on how people outside of the ESL or Scottish clubs could network with those people in clubs? Sort of what is the best way that you can go about that?
Well, I think, are we talking from a person's point of view, or?
I presume so. He didn't say. I presume so.
Because if we're talking from Scottish clubs getting in with networks with clubs like Brighton and a certain Barnsley, it'd be interesting to see if clubs network out into Scotland because of the easier GBE rules with less points required, and there's more of a route in. From a contact perspective, if you're outside of the UK trying to make connections within the EFL, just message people. Every person I've ever spoken to within football has always taken the time with me to explain things and shown me the way of how to do it. And I wouldn't be there without that kindness. And I always make it my mission. If someone messages me, I will always try my utmost to give them the same that I was given. So it's that sort of thing. It's just message people and talk. And 9 times out of 10, people will be forthcoming and will give you as much help as they can.
Matt, anything else to add to that? Because I don't. I always think it's completely nail on the head.
Yeah, I think we covered it during this anyway, right? You can use Twitter to network really well. Obviously, don't mass tag. or spam.
It's one of those things that I think people, when they're trying to build a bit of a following, and I was definitely guilty of this from the get go, is just mass tagging, and it doesn't necessarily come across the best way. As you say, I think just messaging people in the DMs and just going, sort of, I'm thinking about putting this out, sort of, what's your views, or do you have any opinions on this? And as you say, I think 99% of the time people will get back to you about those sort of things and use their opinion on that for sure. A couple more from someone we all know a little bit better, Blues Breakdown, who's actually trying to record this, I think, because he can't listen to it. So I'm hoping he can record it for us and share that. But anyway, his first one was, with the increase in clubs recruiting managers of similar styles, do you think we'll see an increase in manager metrics?
It's not something I've come across before. I know Matt's the only one here that's recruited a manager recently, so he's probably better equipped to answer this sort of question. It's not something I've looked at personally in any of my roles that I've had in the last 4 or 5 years.
Matt?
Yeah, well, I wasn't actually not this time around. But we've already seen it with Piotr from Analytics FC, right? His dashboards are incredible, and I'm sure the clubs will actually use those in a practical sense, and they can really, give the club an idea of what this manager is and what he'd bring to the club. So I think we've already seen that increase right here on Twitter, really. So yeah, maybe something more public.
I agree. I think it's sort of there's been a bit of the tip of the iceberg sort of thing. It's slowly happening. There's a few more bits about there, and there definitely will be some people that are using it. But I definitely don't think clubs are probably doing it enough to form their opinions on new coaches all of the time. But equally, there's that, and then it's sort of getting the data. I think there's a bit more of a shift, especially lower down in the EFL, with younger coaches coming out of academies to get their sort of first role at a club now, and it's sort of getting that data on them would just be insanely hard. And I think there's definitely a place for it, 100%, and I think it will continue to grow. But it's just sort of will it happen? Will it happen at every club? Probably not. And probably those smarter clubs, like a certain Barnsley, probably would look at that stuff a little bit more than other clubs, for example. And the last one from Blues Breakdown is best grounds around the country to visit from a scouting or analytic perspective, and why. Any standout stadiums from this season so far, or last year?
Oh, see, I was unfortunate that I spent most of my analysis days in League Two and in the Welsh Valley, so most of mine was up a mountain somewhere. I was up a mud hill when I used to record the Academy at Cardiff, so I really haven't had the luxury life. Hospitality this year, it's all just fairly basic. To be honest, there's not really been much to say. All clubs are pretty standard when it comes to it. I know the northern ones have been a bit kind to you guys.
I was about to say, it must be these
they're great.
Southerners, not as friendly as the northerners, are they?
No, exactly.
Yeah, I'll be lucky to get a hello when I go in.
That's because of your age as a scout. That's why. And what about yourself, Matt? Any nice places you've been to, or any good hospitality?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with hospitality. I think Huddersfield was really nice. Like, they stick you in like the nice little lounge. You get a bar there. You get a good seat. I enjoyed going to Huddersfield. Yeah,
I rate that. I've not been to Huddersfield myself. I'm trying to think standouts. I'm a big fan of Burton. You get looked after at Burton. West Brom as well. West Brom's pretty good. And Derby, actually. Derby are in director's box, which is always nice to see whose friends are in there as well. But anyway, I digress. There's been a couple more through, but there's sort of ones we've touched on. Mark sent through sort of, do you think there'll ever be a point where data overtakes the eye test? And I think we've all sort of convincingly said that already that that's never really going to happen. I think the two things have to coincide. Like, it's sort of mitigation of your signings if you don't go away and actually research them from a numbers perspective and do a bit of your due diligence on them, and then also filing down that big list of shortlist is going to be the main way that clubs use it. But there's needs to be a more advancement of different metrics to be able to ever really trust the data over the eye test. I think is what we said there.
If we could have an expected strop metric every time you concede a goal, that would be useful. Of how do they react to a goal, or communication, or there's things that you can't pick up with data, and that's the biggest thing of why I love watching games live. You can just tell so much about a player, their attitude, how they work with others, the system, all just little things you wouldn't pick up on from either watching it on like just the TV cam. So it's just stuff like that. If we could ever get data to quantify communication or quantify stuff like that, then it would be an interesting one to see if data then would become more prevalent.
Yeah, I massively agree. There's just so many intangibles that sort of how does a player react to a situation that you don't get on Wyscout or StatsBomb or whatever provider people use. It's just always going to be the case. You're always going to have to go and watch a player for yourself. Not always 100% just go off the numbers. And I think that'll do us to wrap us up here. I think unless anyone's got any more burning questions, I'd like to think we've covered off a lot there. It's been a 50 minutes that has absolutely flown by. But yeah, thank you very much for everyone for coming along to this on on a Friday night. I know at 9 o'clock is probably not the best time, but very much appreciate everyone coming along. Hopefully you've took something away from it. There's been a few tweets knocking about with some real positive comments, which is amazing. So thank you very much to every one of them. And as I said before, drop these two lads a follow. They're really good value for it. And drop myself a follow if you don't already. Hopefully want to get on and do more of these on a regular basis for people as well, and sort of see where it takes us. And if any more questions come in now, I'll try and drop a reply to them myself. But yes, Jacob and Matt, thank you so much for giving us 50 minutes, an hour of your time this evening. It's much appreciated, and thank you very much, everyone else, for coming along.
Cheers, appreciate you having us on. If you do have any questions for me or are too shy to drop me just drop me a message on Twitter, and I will try my utmost to get back to you as quick as possible and help you as much as possible. Because if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't be in this position I am today. So you are more than welcome to message me and ask if you need anything.
Yeah, me likewise. Thanks, Liam, for making me an honorary first guest.
Yes, feel honoured. First one's in the door. It's a tough expectation to live up to now. So hopefully the next one we can get along will be even better. But yeah, much appreciated, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening and weekend. Plenty of football to get out to. So enjoy it. Have a good one, everyone, and thank you.